Hello and welcome everybody to the Buy Round 2024 season review. James Graham, Charlie White discussing what an amazing season it was. It's all done and dusted now. Penrith go 4 in a row. We started in Las Vegas. It's been one hell of a ride, Charlie.
It certainly has. It's actually been the longest rugby league season ever on record, but it's flown by for me.
Is that true?
On record, yeah. I think it's like 32 weeks because we had round one obviously spanned across 2 weeks.
Yes, of course.
27 rounds of football, and there's still internationals to come.
There is still internationals to come, an Origin series that will be remembered for a very long time as well.
I think the internationals as well, just not to detour too early on, but the NRL has the sweet spot with these internationals. There's like no sport on really. You've got, the NBL, not a heap of sport for sport lovers. So this is a real opportunity to try and build this up over the next few years, and I hope it works out for them. Yeah,
me too. Well, it was interesting. We had Volandis and Abdo on Triple M on the grand final coverage, and they spoke about this as an area that we believe has a lot of potential, a lot of growth potential. So they're gonna put some resources into it. And I think at first I was skeptical about the NRL's involvement in international rugby league. I thought it might compromise it, but I actually think it's going to help accelerate it and give it the recognition and credit that it deserves. And I think for the fans and the viewers out there, get behind it because you're watching some of the games best.
It's one of the topics on the round table as well as the scheduling of rep football as well. So stay tuned for that. I love the first episode on the officiating of the game. Great crew. If you haven't listened to it yet, I would recommend you go back and listen to it. Shane Flanagan is the coach this year. We've got Aaron Woods as the player. We've got Tony Mestroff, CEO of Manly. He's also been CEO of Greyhounds, former footy player himself, one of the great business minds of rugby league, and Brent Reid, a just fantastic journalist and very opinionated as well, which is what you want.
He gets stuck into me in a few episodes as well, doesn't he? He pushes back quite a bit, which I actually enjoy, that bit of articulate tussle.
Yeah, I think they're the best shows that we do as the Buy Round. So please go and check it out, everybody.
Again, the season 2024. What's been your highlight of it, Charlie?
My highlight of season 2024 is probably State of Origin for me.
Yeah,
New South Wales coming back from one game. The resurrection of Angus Crichton from where he started in the season, in New South Wales Cup. I think we forget about that. We started the season New South Wales Cup, and to come into Origin and the way he dominated in Origin, I just thought it was an incredible moment. And like honestly, in that game in Melbourne, I don't think I've ever seen a back rower dominate a game the way he did. So just awesome to see him. I don't know if towards the end of the year maybe he was a bit fatigued by the end of the year, and the Roosters as a whole sort of dropped off a little bit after those injuries. But yeah, I think Angus Crichton's resurrection and State of Origin for sure.
Nothing about the Bulldogs.
Bulldogs was a good story. I'll tell you one thing about the Bulldogs.
Good story. It was a great performance. Not a good story, not a feel-good story. They, for me, were just an amazing quality football team.
Yeah. I know you love the Doggies, and we're going to have a chance to talk about the Doggies in full, but I do think they're a bit overhyped on the premiership betting markets on Ladbrokes for next year.
Yeah, they're third favourites, which is...
they are, yeah.
Interesting.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, that's the initial market, and the bookmakers obviously...
Because who have they got coming over? They've got Amon from the Super League.
Yeah, Tupanua from the Roosters.
Goodbye.
So middle four. Well, I think maybe, look, this is further down the track. I think we might see Tupanua go into the middle. That's just an educated guess.
Very versatile. What's your heart of the Dogs?
It's the story of the year in terms of the NRL.
Yeah.
Yeah, the resurrection of the Bulldogs.
Yeah, okay.
Like, it's been, like, it inspired a fan base. We saw what they brought to the NRL as a whole. On the flip side, the story of the year, it came at the very back end, which was Kevin Walters moving on from Brisbane. Like, that was, incredible.
Yeah.
Like, absolutely incredible. The soap opera of rugby league. Obviously, we're going to talk about like the product and the performances of each and every team and give them a bit of a rating and a season recap. But that story, Charlie, was incredible. The way it broke, the Broncos went under the microscope, and then we thought it was over. We thought, we'll wait and see what comes next year, and then bang, gone.
Crazy. I mean, there could still be some more drama during this off-season as well, but we're going to work up the ladder, aren't we?
Yeah, let's work up.
So we're going to start with the Tigers. Obviously, their third straight spoon. We did the halfway season report as well. I think they were sitting last then as well. Yeah, 3 spoons in a row. But there is some positives for next year. Jerome Luai's coming. Sanua Taruva's coming. Jack Bird's coming. A couple other players are on their way. But yeah, another tough year for the Tigers, Jimmy.
Very tough. And probably another story of the year, the Spoon Bowl, and just how much that dominated the headline. It was 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The build up for 2 weeks, the way the cards fell, didn't matter what Parramatta did against the Dragons from memory.
Yeah.
They won that game, but more importantly, they won Spoon Bowl. Tigers were very disappointing in that game, but they were disappointing all year. I think, Benji Marshall in his first full year in charge, to not win a wooden spoon, but to be receiving a wooden spoon, he'll be disappointed with that. Very disappointed. We thought he would bring new ideas. We thought he would bring better defense, but it just didn't eventuate for the Tigers. And I know people will look for positives and say there's green shoots there and whatnot, but for me, they look disorganised a lot of the time.
There are green shoots there, though. And I think if you look at any sport, when you're the youngest team in the competition, you're not going to win many games. And Tigers are built around youth, and they're playing the long game. So I think there are green shoots there. You look at guys like Lockie Galvin. Obviously, he had his defensive issues, but in attack looks like a really good player. He's 18, 19 years old.
Yeah,
Jareem Buller's a baby, and he was injured for a lot of the back half of the year as well. There's players there, and then Luai's coming over.
But I think for this year though, they would have looked to have been. I reckon there were 6 wins. I reckon they're probably 2-3 short of what would have been like a successful season, and I reckon they're 1 or 2 short of being like okay with that.
Yeah,
and building in the right direction, Charlie. They did bring in a lot of debutants for this year. I think you probably got to look at some of the signings that they brought in that probably didn't hit the straps that everybody thought they would, and maybe that is a reflection on those people. Maybe it's a reflection on the environment. So when people talk about next season and these signings that they've got coming, they've signed not too dissimilar style and people or players like that before, and they haven't kicked or they haven't dominated the competition. Like even with a guy like Luai, Appy has not managed to make a difference. He's come from the same system, and
he's tried his best though. Appy.
He has, Charlie, and you've got to love him for his amount of effort that he puts in. But we've seen Bateman come and not be able to reproduce Olam.
But Olam and Bateman are different players too.
I know,
but buying someone like Luai, Olam and Bateman past their prime, heading the other way.
I'm talking about people like the Jack Birds of the world that come in.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about.
But I don't think people expect
like
Jack Bird to come and turn the Tigers around.
No, I know they're not, but they've signed this style of player before, and they've not managed to do much. I think, in reflection, that the Tigers will be disappointed. It's just, and they're again talk of favourites and betting markets for next year. Currently, the Tigers are the favourites to win the spoon for next season.
They are. Who was their best player this year, do you think?
Lockie Galvin.
Yeah.
He was a shining light for them. He really was. And the problem that the Tigers have is when a young player comes into their system and plays first grade and is a shining light, everyone goes, I wouldn't mind a bit of him. For me, Galvin, I was really liking his development, that left edge, that double up play. the run threat. He wanted the ball for a teenager, for a baby to be in a losing team, to be actually looking to contribute and thrive, run towards, like, give me the ball, the way he took on opposition. I thought he was fantastic. People might talk about his defence. Look, he's not there to defend, and part of that advancement in his game will come from a defensive system. But the unfortunate thing for Tigers is he's going to be constantly linked with moves away from the football club because he is so good. He's been a real shining light for them.
What's your grade then for the year? We'll do A to F for every team. Are they an F?
Massive.
Yeah.
Massive F.
Capital
yes.
F.
Capital F.
Another team that had a shocking year, Jimmy, as we work our way up the ladder, of South Sydney Rabbitohs. I think I tipped them for the premiership pre-season.
I had them in the top 4, Charlie.
Yeah, I think that's what I think I said. Called on Latrell Mitchell to have one of his best years, win the Dally M, South win the comp. Didn't work out that way. Jason Demetriou sacked early on in the year. They had a little revival after his sacking, and then it just got worse.
It looked like they, I don't want to say give up, but it looks like they were thinking about next year.
I reckon if the season was 2 or 3 weeks longer, South probably win the spoon.
Yeah, you know what, Charlie? You're onto something there, mate. Like, they finishing 16th.
Yeah.
But for such a big club.
It was disastrous.
It was disaster, wasn't it? And I actually thought they played all right in Vegas. It was a good game against Manly. But now they came in with so much expectation. Obviously, moving on JD, heartbreaking for him. To be fair, they did have a tough draw to begin the competition, and that was always going to be difficult. But if you come out of that, those opening 8 weeks, 5-3, 6-2, those easier fixtures are coming around the corner. But yeah, they just couldn't get it right. And look, I really did feel sorry for JD, and maybe South needed to cut ties, but it was a wasteful season.
Yeah,
for them, for the talent that they have, massively wasteful season. And they've got people like Cook moving on, Tom Burgess moving on to club grades. They've got some shoes to fill there as well.
We were just trying to think before who was their best player as well, and no one really stood out for South this year.
You could make a case for Keon Kaloa-Matangi. When he came into the middle, he seemed to be better, but they were dreadful.
Yeah. And it was injuries and suspensions, I think, also affected them a lot. And then that early momentum that they lost because of those injuries and suspensions, then things just spiraled.
Yeah. Like, you think about some of those press conferences, Cam Murray just sat there with his sort of 1,000-yard stare, just looking glazed into the distance. I felt so bad for him. But Charlie, you are so right in terms of that. If they couple more weeks and they're the Spooners, they started badly, like you say, a bit of a revival, and then it just fell off a cliff. It got even worse, which is a hard thing to do considering the poor start to the season they had.
This could be, though, like the perfect example of the butterfly effect, though. So South have this terrible year, so bad that they have to sack Jason Demetriou, but they get to bring in Wayne Bennett, which could be the best thing that happens to their club in the next 5 years.
I guess we'll all wait and see. This is a big job, and it's on paper, and I think in reality, when you weigh everything up, this is a way more difficult job second time around for Wayne Bennett.
There's some good. They've still got some great players. That roster's still a very good roster when fit.
Yeah, and they would believe that, but they've got some work to do.
Who was their best player then?
I want to go Keon Kaloa-Matangi.
And is this another F team?
Oh, massively.
Yeah.
Yeah, massively. When you consider, like, mate, when we talk about like expectation at the start of the season and where people thought they'd be, like people predicted the Tigers would be there or thereabouts near the bottom, but not many people had Souths anywhere near there. Definitely not 16th.
No,
massive F.
Then we work up the ladder. Parramatta Eels. Tough year for them.
Yeah, another coach gone.
Brad Arthur was one of the longest tenured coaches in the NRL as well. But they had some issues as well with injuries. I mean, Mitchell Moses missed a large chunk of time, but it started poorly for Parramatta and it stayed poor for just the whole year, really.
Yeah, questions around their coach. I think probably the same for Souths. The pressure got to the group. They were trying to show some fight for their coach, but it just never eventuated. And you're probably right in terms of the injuries to Moses, who showed what he can do at state of origin level, which, like, if you're a Parramatta fan, you think, oh, that's great, he can do that for us. But then again, he's probably thinking, do I want to play with some better players each and every week?
I hate this storyline. I hate this. Moses could sign for the next 2 years.
Yeah, and I know he is, but as we well and truly know, Charlie, nowadays when coaches, football managers and retention and recruitment committees meet, they don't ask for a list.
Well, it does. No, I don't care though. Mitchell Moses signed for the next 2 years. And Parramatta would never, ever, ever let him go.
No, you're probably right, but in his mind, he's probably thinking, get me to the end.
Although, I mean, by all accounts, him and Jason Riles have connected really well. And they're talking a lot about game plans, and Mitchell Moses is really impressed with how Riles thinks about the game.
And that's great. Just maybe you got a taste in Origin.
But why can't you just say, oh yeah, we can do it with this group in Parramatta?
Well, because they had 7 wins and 17 losses. And I know he was missing for a large part.
Yeah.
They, again, a really poor effort from them, and they move on Brad Arthur. That was a big headline. Strange, like, front office decisions to come forward and say we went after Wayne just before he was announced at Souths. Like, was that a decision to come forward with that information to say, hey, look guys, we tried.
Yeah.
We tried to get
We
Wayne.
thought about that.
Yeah. Like, because Parramatta fans would be going, well, why didn't you try and get Wayne Bennett?
Yeah.
And they said, well, we did, but it's an admission of yet another failure. And I think at that point, there was no confirmation of them talking with Wayne. It was, there was the talk of like, why wouldn't he? And maybe sometimes people go, look, the truth comes out in the end, but I honestly think that they could have kept that one private. And then look, the season as a whole, there was some underperformance there from the squad as a whole, like from the team as the whole. They looked out of sync. Like Gutho looked like he was trying his best, injured and trying his best. They were, I think, looking at their team, it is too similar in terms of their forwards. That they're a very attacking minded team, or individuals that are known for their attack, but they just could not connect as a team whatsoever.
Well, they're going to lose some players now as a result. Regan Campbell-Gillard goes, so that's going to change up their forward stocks a bit. They haven't got. I mean, who have they got coming in? They've got Zach Lomax coming in. They've got Isaiah Ongi coming in. Yeah, Jack
Penrith.
Williams from the Sharks.
Very good signing. Yeah, I really like that signing. I'm surprised the Sharks let him go, to be fair.
Yeah, and then Dean Hawkins is coming over as well from South Sydney. But they do lose. Yeah, Regan Campbell-Gillard, the big one, and Blaze Talangi, the other big name player. Ethan Sanders, the young half, goes to Canberra as well. But overall,
the thing about them losing those quality youngsters, yeah. Look, it is disappointing. You want to keep them, but where is their path to first grade when you've got, like you say, Moses for 2 years, Brown for 2 years, Gutho at fullback, like maybe there with Gutho, but Sanders, his path to first grade, you'd hope if you're a Para fan, is blocked.
Yeah, but then that is what it is. If you got Mitchell Moses, I think unfortunately you would take Mitchell Moses every day of the week over Ethan Sanders. And if you've got a gun half like Moses or gun two halves like Moses and Brown, you have to let guys like this go. That's the reality. Yeah. Who was their best player? Have you said that already? Or no?
Gutho.
Gutho,
I thought he really did try his best, but again, like, to be harsh, you've got to give them another big F. Like, played that poorly that their coach got sacked.
Yeah.
The quality of some of the players within that roster.
They're a top 8 team, that roster.
Well, potentially, but, there's Charlie. I reckon 12 to 13 teams would say we're a top 8 roster.
Yeah.
And 12 to 13 doesn't go into 8.
It doesn't. I will say that I think Parramatta will bounce back next year in a big way. Isaiah Iongi, I think I'm pronouncing his name correctly, he is a really good young player. And I think he'll play fullback. Gutho will probably be in the centres with Penasini. Lomax, I know he was promised he left the Dragons and didn't want to play in the wing, but I think Riles has already come out and said he's going to play him wherever he wants to, and Lomax accepts that. He's going to be the best winger in the comp, so he may as well stay there.
But he's got a big job in his hands, Riles. He's got to connect that group again. And, talk of all the loyalty to Brad Arthur will... Yeah.
And the other thing as well, Brian Pappenhausen's a November 1 guy. Parramatta have been dipping their toes in with Pappenhausen for a long time. So
he's got that relationship with Riles.
Exactly right.
Well, obviously we'll talk of the Storm later and obviously all the November 1 stuff, but there's Pezzett or Hughes and Pappenhausen all far longer. Like, 2 of those have got to go.
Yeah. And Fa'alongo's got an agreement as well where if Pappenhausen re-signs, I think then he can explore his options elsewhere. All right, up the ladder then, the Titans. I reckon this can be the first one that's not an F. They had a really tough year. At one point it looked like they were going to get the spoon.
I mean, they 0-7 to begin with.
Yeah.
Just couldn't get a win. They were scrapping for everything. First win comes in New Zealand. And when they were down, it was just impossible. Like, that was one of the biggest favourites all year, I reckon. Warriors to beat Titans. They plucked it, and credit to them because they've been battling and battling. They got pumped at Belmore in round 3. They were beaten just against Canberra game that I think there was some controversial moments in that, Titans felt like they probably should have won that game. And to pack their bags, go back to the Gold Coast, then go over and get the win, catapulted them to some decent victories. And at one point, were looking like, they could play finals. They were in the mixer, and then they fell off the cliff towards the back end of the year. It's probably just too much to ask of Des Hasler's group. Obviously, no Tino is going to impact that with the leader that he is. The David Fafita saga of him signing for the Roosters, then backflipping, coming back, it was a huge boost for the club. I still think they've got to figure out what their best team is, especially in their spine. That for me is the issue that Hasler's got to figure out. And again, when we speak of Parramatta, too much of the same thing in the forwards. Well, it's probably too much of the same thing in their key position players, and they're all just a little bit the same. Even Keanu Keeney, who was fantastic, he's no guarantees to play fullback because you've got Brimson, you got Campbell.
Don't you think he has to play fullback?
Well, he should be, yeah. He should be, Charlie. Yeah, in my opinion, yes.
But I think they could find a team that would take on AJ Brimson because they just re-signed him until 2030.
I know, it was a huge deal.
Huge deal.
Like, huge deal. But Keanu Keeney's like, well, Brimson wants to play fullback.
Yeah.
I think he's openly said things about not wanting to play centre, which, if that's Zach Lomax, people are lambasting him, but it's like you do your job for the team, but he's probably on too much money to play centres.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you've got Jaden Campbell. Where does he fit in the mix? Kieran Foran still steering them around. Like, yeah. To be fair to the Titans, they sort of changed their identity a little bit. They're not the team that gets out to a lead and gets run down. I think under Hasler, their first year, they'll take a lot of lessons from that. And I remember Kieran Foran being like, no, we're going to play finals. We're going to play finals. So they've got that attitude. The story of the Titans season is Tino being injured from round 3.
Yep.
And then the start. If they start better.
Well, their start was poor. Their end was poor. Their middle was fantastic. That was the middle part of their year. If they were able to recreate that, the middle part of their year, they are probably a top 8 team.
Well, yeah, they'd be looking at it, and Hazel would be looking at it and going, we just need to be consistent. Let's think about what we did well in that middle part of the season. We can excuse the beginning and the end, and you excuse the end to fatigue.
Yep.
And you look at the start and go, we were still learning. So,
who was their best player?
Keanu Keeney.
And what's their grading then? First year under Des Hasler.
I'm actually going to give them a C.
A C.
Yeah.
I think that's good. Tino, when you lose your heartbeat of your team, in their second game because they're the bye in round 2.
That's right.
Yeah, just disastrous. The New Zealand Warriors. Now, you got hammered at the start of the year because you had the Warriors outside of your top 8 and you had the Doggies in 6th, and everyone said you were very one-eyed having that. You were right about the Warriors. This was one of your best predictions all year. They end up finishing 13th. What went wrong for them?
I honestly think, Charlie, they just they thought or they expected it to happen. Like they finished 23 against the Broncos, lost that, and there was so much hype in and around them, up the wires, and it was a great feel-good story for our game, and they did play really well the year before. They probably squeezed too much of the juice out of players like Johnson. So I shouldn't say that, no. Johnson clearly went all in. For me this year, he did look a little bit injured. And then when they bought Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, they bought Capewell, like they made improvements to their roster. So that's why everybody thought that they would. But I just think that they fell into a little bit of a trap of this will just happen now. And when you're 1 or 2 percentage points away, like you're light years away. You just it's so difficult to recover. Like so difficult to recover once you just start thinking that way. And think back to the win that they had against Penrith at Magic Round. So they still had it. I think, again, they were probably still figuring out what their best team is. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, what a lovely person coming in. I'll play centres. Well, you think about some of those team first players that you want in your team. That is Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. But also, you need someone that's going to say, no, I want to play fullback. Yeah, they looked on the odd occasion where he went to fullback, which was rare. So they had Charles Nickel-Cluxter and then Tua Picky.
Yep.
But when Roger was there, like they looked so much better.
I hope it's not a case as well of teams figuring out ways of beating the Warriors as well. And Andrew Webster's tactics not being as strong second year round when people have enough time to, break down.
Well, they were so reliant on Johnson in 23. He just wasn't the same.
And everyone's expecting them to go better next year because they lose Fanua-Blake, who was at times toxic for them off the field as well. I mean, he got suspended.
That's what people say. Yeah.
Well, they suspended him for a game due to discipline reasons.
They did.
So at times he was had a negative influence on the team. Fisher-Harris will not be a negative influence on the team at all. He's probably the most professional front rower in the game. But their spine's their big issue, isn't it, next year?
Yeah.
Who's going to play in the halves? You got Luke Metcalf at 5'8", but who's going to be their halfback?
Tavita Harris? Harris-Tavita, sorry?
Yeah, exactly. But that's not...
Maybe Metcalf?
Yeah. But is that half combination going to, be a top 8 team?
Probably not.
Yeah.
No, I think it's probably reset our expectations with the Warriors. Like sometimes we get, distracted by a year.
Yep.
Or influenced by a year, but the reality of it is, it's like, no, this is the Warriors that we've come to know and expect. Like maybe that 1 year was just they got hot at that time with their best players. And I think it's a bit of a back down to reality for the Warriors.
Interesting how Jet Cleary develops over there as well. Maybe in a couple of years' time, he can be the halfback. What's the grading for the Warriors?
I'm between a D and an E.
So they've failed.
Probably an E considering expectations,
I like it. Did you say who the best player was?
The best player was Roger for me.
Roger, nice. We move lad to the Broncos. I don't think we need to talk about the Broncos heaps. We've spent a lot of time with the Broncos the last few weeks. Obviously, a terrible year.
It speaks for itself, doesn't it? Terrible year. In a nutshell, couldn't get over last year's grand final, and I think that showed in the not just on-field performances, but I reckon you could see they were not connected. That and whether or not that plays a part in it, you go back to the grand final. They were a great team to watch, and when that game finished, most people thought like, no, they're in the window here. Like this is going to be they're going to be the Penrith from 2020 that are going to react to this defeat. But I just think there was issues there away from the football field that they didn't address.
Who was their best player?
Stags,
okay. And I imagine this is a poor grade. This is a team that was a grand finalist.
Yeah. You've got to give them an E, don't you? Really?
An E, yeah. I thought you could even give them an F. I mean, 10 wins, they were near the 8, but...
Yeah, they kept flirting with the 8, didn't they?
Yeah.
You know what? In the big game... Sorry, not just the big games, but there was some games where it seemed all on the line and they got pumped.
Yeah.
Like the Bulldogs game Saturday afternoon. Right, this is this big top 8 contest, challenging for the 8. They just awful. And then the Dolphins game, awful. Like over 40 points in both of those games.
That other game against the Titans where they were up big and lost when we were up there in Brisbane for that one. I reckon that was a real turning point of their season. Round 12, so just after Magic Round, they lose 36-34 heading into Origin. Like if they win that, I think it could be a different year for them.
Yeah, remember the young centre could have just passed the ball?
Yeah.
Was it Karapani?
It might have been, yeah.
I think it was. He could have just passed it. And that was just before Origin. They were shattered on the field. Like Charlie, that was a big turning point. They lose that game going into Origin, and then obviously they're not going to have that same group around. Good point.
Let's work up the ladder then. Dragons. Fantastic year overall. Because of the poor ending for them and all the noise around Ben Hunt, it kind of feels like it's a bad year, but it's not been a bad year. They were favourites for the Wooden Spoon. They ended up with 11 wins, just one win outside the top 8, Jimmy.
Look, and they should have been in the 8. They'd be filthy that they're not. They really should have played finals football. The game that let them down was that game against Parramatta, which was one of the most bizarre games of football you're ever likely to see. But yeah, I think they showed some character this year. They showed some fight. The story's in and around Ben Hunt, but for me, the story was Lomax. Like, wanted out, got his new deal somewhere else, and I don't know if there's ever been a player perform as well when they know they go into a new club the following season.
And also perform as well when they're playing out of position and not happy that they're in that position.
Yeah. No, I can't recall a player ever doing that well.
Yeah.
Well,
the club means a lot to Lomax. I mean, he was in tears that last game of the year.
Yeah. And look, yeah, he did. Maybe he wanted something new, but the Dragons actually impressed me. When people were talking about Coach of the Year, obviously Serraldo, Cleary, Bellamy, like if the Dragons had got into the finals, Flanagan would be in the mix because, like you say, Charlie, people saying they're going to finish bottom, like dead set bottom. But I think, one of the issues for the Dragons has been, figuring out the fullback problem with Sloan, and I remember he was dropped for a couple of games, and he came back in. I think it was through illness maybe or a late injury, and he played really well. They need consistency from him. I think with Ben Hunt, the reason that the talk at the end of the season is I think Origin kicked his arse. I think he's now at an age where I don't know if he can. I don't know if he can do what he does at Origin and then come back and play consistent club football. Like he looked tired. We've still got, and probably the same for Sewer as well. I think the impact of Origin affected him, who was there or thereabouts for their best. If it wasn't for Lomax, he was their best player.
Yeah. Ben Hunt, he's playing for Australia. He's in the Australian squad. I thought he might miss out in the Australian squad, but he's in there. The talk is that he might not be at the Dragons, though, next season. We don't fully know what's going to happen.
No, that there is those talks doing the rounds, but I think at the start of the season, you could see what Ben Hunt bought, and he leads try assists for NRL.
Oh, mate.
And he misses a ton of football through Origin.
That's what I think they can't afford to lose Ben Hunt. They've already lost Zach Lomax and Ben Hunt. I'd be staggering the amount of percentage of their points that came from those two, or at least one of them involved in the points.
It will tries, but one of them kicks goals. Obviously, Val Holmes comes in. You could say like for like replacement for Lomax, but I think you need Ben Hunt there to pull the strings and set Val up. So, but for me, and all in all, an excess as quite a. I think the overall picture, you go, if this is the ladder that is presented to you in the preseason trials, you go, wow, Dragons did well. But obviously, context of the season, moving forward, considering where they could have been, you go, oh, that's a bit of a fail. But I think the overall picture, I'm going to give them a C.
I like it. Then who'd you say the best player was? Lomax, all right. The Dolphins, Jimmy, they almost made it for the finals in their second year. Wayne Bennett's last year now. He's moving on. How do you sum up their year, really?
There'll be a team that'll be disappointed within themselves that they didn't make the 8. The loss of Marshall King was catastrophic for them, wasn't it? And even think Flegler, like his loss, Gilbert, like they all things considered, it's again they wouldn't accept this, but I think it's pretty successful. Second year in, people argued about their favourable draw, and then they faced the tough games. They probably didn't pick up as many points as they would have liked, but they've been the thing about the Dolphins is they're a fun team to watch. You think of guys like the Hammer, Herbie Farnworth, Trey Fuller, who came in. They've got some people that work incredibly hard. Max Plath probably just needs a little bit of help, and that help.
Max Plath.
The help is Gilbert, and the help is Flegler.
Yep.
Interesting. The halves combination, Katoa come in, but then Nikarima, O'Sullivan. There's some figuring out to do there within the halves, but form plays a part in that as well. They lose a bit of experience with Jesse Bromwich moving on. We'll see what happens with Kenny Bromwich, who wasn't getting picked towards the back end. So Kenny Bromwich was sort of out of the team, but yet there's no Flegler. And there's no Gilbert. We don't know if Flegler will come back, but it's not looking good for him. But the Dolphins, I think, when you summarise their season, and they were in it right until the death. They basically played a playoff game before. They were the wild card game, weren't they? Really, like if the NRL brings in a wild card, 8v 9th. Or ninth, whatever it is, like that was the wild card game.
It was.
You just, for me, I think they played their grand final the week before when that Battle of Brisbane. Yeah.
They were sitting in 4th spot at the end of round 15. I think I actually predicted them to still miss the 8 at that point as well. So that was my sort of Warriors moment of the year, I think.
Well, I think that's it. They were in and around the top 4 because they started the season so well, but then when people forecast the draw that they had, it was like, oh no, they'll face some tougher games later in the year. Probably two contenders for try of the year. You know, I know people will think about the coach try in the corner, but Trey Fuller and the hammer.
Yeah. Couple sexy tries.
Brilliant.
I will say I called them a boring team to watch. I was so wrong. Fun team to watch. Just so many interesting players.
Yeah. Hammer is the best player, and I'm going to give them a C.
A C. Okay, fair enough. The Canberra Raiders. Many people's tip for the wooden spoon. The Canberra Raiders.
Sorry, your tip for the wooden spoon.
My tip for the wooden spoon. They finished 9th, Jimmy. They were right there and thereabouts. They're for and against again this year.
Yeah,
awful.
Let them down. That for and against. 12-12, the same record that got the Knights into the finals. Some home games where they really let themselves down. There was one against the Cowboys where they got booed off at halftime. That was awful from them. Ricky Stewart, they got off to a great start. He was really pushing the right buttons when it comes to like motivation and what they were all about. Fogarty, again, injury. Like, this is a consistent theme with a lot of teams. Just how heavily they rely on their star players, the teams that cover those star players well, obviously up near the top end, but Fogarty lost for the significant period of time. They've got some good young players coming in next year. Fogarty,
even KO Weeks and Ethan Strange, but both look very good.
Yeah, and they've got some development to go. For me, Fogarty was their best player, and they get a C as well, Charlie. Sort
of an end of an era in Canberra as well. Elliot Whitehead moves on, Jordan Rapiner moves on. New look Canberra side next year. Yeah. What was that grade, sorry?
A C.
A C, and most important player, Fogarty.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, now you into the top 8, Newcastle Knights. At times during the year, it looked like Adam O'Brien was under immense pressure, talk of him even being sacked, similar to the year before in 2023 as well, but they made the top 8, Jimmy. Not a bad year.
Yeah, I just wonder how much the late run of form sort of paves over the cracks. And you could maybe say the same for last year. Obviously, last year they went on that real big run, and there's a lot of hype around them. So much reliance on Ponga. Although they did find a pattern or a way of playing that suited them without KP, but then when he came back, they didn't know if they were coming or going. And then they play the Cowboys and they just, bow out.
Knights fans aren't going to like me saying this, but I think for Kalen Ponga's legacy, I think he has to try and get out of Newcastle at some point over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
I think his talents are just wasted there. And I think seeing him in a team where he had more support around him, I think he doesn't get to showcase how special a player he is, and I don't think he gets the credit he deserves.
You're probably right there, Charlie. But that's what being one of the highest paid players in the game, or the highest paid player in the game, comes with that. You probably don't get to surround yourself with all that talent.
No, but you'd like to see them spend their money more wisely. If you're Kalen Ponga, not give Jackson Hastings $800 a year.
That's it, Charlie. When it comes to the Knights, who is their best halves? What's their best halves combination? We don't know.
No, Adam O'Brien doesn't know either.
More importantly, Adam O'Brien doesn't know. He needs to figure that out. I think he needs to get in the market for one of the halves that are potentially available and throw them an offer, put some work into them, and sell them on KP. That's what you got to do. If you're a half who's not playing, if you're an Ilias, if you're a Peasant, you need to be going, well, where can I go and play? Well, look, come to Newcastle. Maybe even Ben Hunt.
Yeah.
They've got that Queensland connection.
Good stopgap for them for a couple of years anyway.
Yeah.
Ponga, their best player?
Kai Pearce-Paul did some decent things.
Pommy, of course.
Dylan Lucas, I actually didn't. Thompson, the big front row, but no, Ponga.
And their grade.
I want to go a D,
A D, okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, Seagulls, 7th place. Another year.
I know what you're saying with that, because there's teams below them that got higher gradings, but I think in the context of this season.
Yeah, they still failed, because a D is a fail. Less than 50%
no,
of D.
An F is a fail.
No, an F is 0%, I'm pretty sure.
Or
low to 0, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Maths is not my strong suit. Seagulls, 7th spot, Jimmy. 13 wins, a good effort by them. They had a great game against the Doggies. They got into week 2 of finals. How do you sum up their year?
Look, a team that proved they can mix it with the best. They beat all the top 4 teams. They really did. Just unfortunately, consistency really let Manly down. Like, look back at their season, Charlie. They threw away leads against Para, against Canberra, and the Tigers. Games they should have won against teams who were really poor. Speaks of a lack of concentration. The style that they play with this early yardage shift, I like it because they've got pace, but it comes. Sometimes teams figured that out, and I think a team of this quality should have a plan B. They showed that against the Bulldogs, where they just peppered the middle in that round 26 or 27 game, round 26 game. I think you got to be able to play both. They've got some great players in the game, but I mean, so if those 3 games that they lost, that I've spoken about, where they got comebacks against them, against Para, against Canberra and the Tigers, they win those 3 games, they finish 3rd, right? They had that. If they don't have that shootout draw against the Warriors, they're on points difference for 2nd, and maybe with those win margins, they're ahead of Penrith. Like those are the margins, and those are the things that you've got to look at when you look at the game as a whole. Like, they should be getting those victories. They didn't. The Turbo Centre experiment is something that they need to look at. Like, where do Manly need to play Tommy Turbo to win a premiership?
Fullback.
But can they do that?
Well, they've got no choice, really, with the money they're paying him.
Well, they do have, but do they play him there all year, or just roll him out for big games? Because what appears evident, Charlie, is he can't survive a full NRL season at fullback.
No.
So, yes, that's the only way they can win a premiership there, but he can't do that.
Well, then they've got to be selective when they rest him.
Well, they
and maybe rest him more than you would, your best player. And it must be hard as a coach when you got Tom Travoy sitting there. He's fit, but it would be hard to rest him. Very hard.
Yeah, and look, their campaign was over in about 30 seconds. Like, great game against the Dogs. Like, showed the brilliance of some of their senior players, but their season was over. The season was over in 30 seconds. I'm going to give them a B.
A B. Okay. And their best player was Turbo, did you say?
Illawarra.
Illawarra, yeah. Nice. All right, the Doggies. We're running out of time on this podcast, but I know you could spend 25 minutes pumping up the Bulldogs.
Inspired the community, Charlie. Lost the first 2, lost the last 2. They'll look for more consistency in their approach. A lot of people were critical about their performance, about their recruitment. In fact, not just lost the first 2. They were 1-3 to start the campaign. I loved what they brought to the table, though. Their system and their belief in their system now. Arguably, their best game or best 2 games were against Melbourne and Penrith, where they showed they compete with the top 2. Obviously, I love what they brought to the table. Some great players there that really shone. Sexton back in at the second half of the year. He probably needs a full season at first grade now.
Yep.
And maybe he's ready for that. And that'll be a big determining factor whether or not they can go a little bit higher in 2025.
Is the grade an A, given no one expected them to do it?
No, they're going to get a B as well.
Just a B, not a B plus or anything like that?
No, I'm not into pluses and minuses.
I like it. And you're the best player? Burton. All right. North Queensland Cowboys, weird year for them. It was a shit start. They bounced back. They end up finishing 5th. Incredible, because their draw was so soft on the run home. 15 wins, 9 losses. Good year for them.
All right. Like, defensive. Again, you look at 5th and you think, like, they did well. But defensively, they were shocking in parts of the year. Like, really bad. Arguably, their best game was against the Dogs in round 27. In fact, I think it's fair to say it was. Best player for them, probably Tommy Dearden. Like, he was amazing again all year. They win one game in playoffs, but then, they were always going to be up against it after that.
Yep. It is a new era for them as well. You got Felt leaving, Holmes leaving. Who else are they leaving? Chad Townsend, Finafuiaki's leaving. A lot of players leaving that club. So whether they stay as a top 5 team next year, who knows?
They get a C, Charlie.
They get a C, okay. And their best player? You got Ruben Cotter, you got Tommy Dearden.
Yeah, Dearden, yes.
Dearden for sure. Yeah. He's developed a lot. He certainly has. All right. We get into the top 4, Jimmy. Now, the Cronulla Sharks, they started the season red hot. They managed to hang in there in the top 4. They finally win a couple games in finals. Well, win a game in finals. Mate, they made a prelim.
They should have been minor premiers.
Yeah.
They should have been minor premiers. Start the season so well. Then comes the test. Penrith, after Melbourne and Roosters, they win 2 out of 3. I think that's definitely a pass. And then they just went into free fall. Like the Nico situation, injury and origin clearly affected him and the team.
Yep.
I think Trindle is really becoming a leader now. I think Nico's basically got to play 6 and just take some responsibility off him. If I was Fitzgibbon, I'd be encouraging Nico to just quit social media full stop. Just leave it alone. Leave it to the rest of the world and just focus on your football. But look, the big thing for the Sharks is they beat some of the other big contenders in the year and obviously won their first finals game in a very long time. So I think they'll be happy with that, but really they shouldn't have been in this situation where they go down to play Melbourne in week 1 of finals. They should have been the minor premiers with the draw that they had, the start that they had, beating those two out of 3 teams in the top 4 in that cluster of games. They'll be disappointed. So I'm going to give them a B just on basically the fact that they won that playoff game against the Cowboys. If they'd have lost that, like serious question marks.
Yeah, and when their comeback was starting, that could have been disastrous just mentally for them moving forward. Fanua Blake comes there next year as well, which could be a good signing. I think by all accounts, Fitzgibbon runs a very tight ship, very intense training sessions. So Fanua Blake, if he wants to have that sort of relaxed attitude, it's not going to go down well in Cronulla.
Well, they missed that Merce Finucane as well.
Yeah,
like they really missed him, and no one really filled that gap. Best player probably Trindle, but Cam McKenna's not far behind him. Each and every week, what he does, he's like Isaiah.
Recency bias there, I reckon you've got with Trindle because he finished the year strong.
You're probably right.
Overall for the whole year.
Yeah, you know what? You're probably right. It's probably Cam.
Yeah,
because you could say Iro as well, but recency bias. Yeah.
We've spoken about the Roosters a lot on this podcast with Cheese. They finished 3rd. We've spoken about their premiership window closing.
Would have loved to have seen what they could have done with everyone on the field at the back end.
Yeah.
Biggest issue, Charlie, 50% of their losses came against 2 teams.
Really? Which 2 teams?
Storm and Panthers.
Okay.
So they played those teams 4 times. They lost 4 times. They lose 8 games for the year.
Wow.
That has to be an issue they address. Like, they must look at their style, the way they defend, the way they attack, the way they manage the cycle of the game. And it's a compliment to them that the 2 best teams constantly produce results against them. But if the Roosters are going to win a premiership, they need to figure out how they can beat both of those. Because if they're going to win a premiership again anytime soon, they're going to have to beat Melbourne and they're going to have to beat Penrith.
Yeah, and their roster's still amazing. Even though the players they're losing, their roster is still amazing. Overall, their grade, though?
I'll go B.
B.
All things considered.
I'll tell you what, I think we were robbed as fans with Cheese and Sam Walker going down. They were... I think they were a chance to win the comp if they're fully fit.
Yeah, and most people would agree with that. But again, Charlie, even with those players, they couldn't beat Penrith and they couldn't beat Melbourne.
Yeah, that's true. And who was their best player?
Best player would be Angus Crichton. Yeah, seriously, come on.
We've got to the top 2. Panthers, we've waxed lyrically about for the last few days. It's obviously an A. They've won the comp.
Absolutely.
A plus.
Yeah. You know what? They only scored 40 points 3 times. And they didn't get over 50. And their belief in their system is incredible. look, some young players come into the system as well. The McLeans of the world. Alamotti was amazing. Liam Smith. Liam Henry, Lindsay Smith. Yeah, they struggled around the Origin period, lost to Dragons and Cowboys.
As you can expect, though, given they've got 5 Origin players.
Just defensively, they are insanely good defensively. They are so hard to break down. They cycle the game better than anybody else. Obviously, the best defensive team in the competition, and then they conceded something like 22 points in 3 games in finals.
It's just insane.
And one of those tries should never have been given in terms of the one that Cronulla scored.
Yeah, and we pumped up the Doggies defense all year, and then they ended up the Panthers ended up conceding 40 less points than them.
Yeah,
unbelievable.
Yeah.
A for them, best player.
Isaiah.
Yeah, Isaiah. 100%. Cool. All right, Melbourne Storm, Jimmy. It didn't end the way they wanted. Obviously, Jerome Hughes is going to be their best player, the Dally M medalist.
Yes.
Coach of the year, Craig Bellamy, 19 wins, only 5 losses. A fantastic year, but they just fell short.
Yeah, and they'll be. It's just the big dance got the better of them, and they couldn't find a way to play to their strengths in that grand final. There's nothing much more they could have done all the year. They really couldn't. Maybe they look at some of those little moments in the grand final, some of those younger players like your Houths of the world, and even Pappenhausen. We forget he's still growing into his shoes. Farlongo as well. They'll look at that and go, just those little moments. We need to practice that all year round, consistent approach. So in those big games like the grand final, we don't get caught out, which is what ultimately ended up happening.
Are they still in A though?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They're premiership favourites next year on Ladbrokes.
They were immense. They really were, and you play that grand final 10 times, and 5 times Penrith win, 5 times Melbourne win.
Yep. Well, that's probably all we've got time for then, Jimmy. Episode 2 of the Round Table coming Tuesday.
Yes, coming Tuesday. It's amazing chat as always. Those 4 are fantastic. Love what we've done with the Round Table as well. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And here's to season 2024. Cheers, over and out.